听力测验
1. 图片听解第一部分单选题。说明，请听语音播出的试题，根据内容在4幅图片中选出最符合题意的图片。
1.
Are you okay? You look noticeably overwhelmed today.
I've had a lot of tight deadlines imposed on me lately. It's starting to take its toll, I think.
You should be cautious about your mental health. Too much stress can have a hugely negative impact on your health.
I know, but I'm new here, and although I want to assert myself and put boundaries on what I do, I still feel the need to impress my bosses and say yes to everything.
I understand. I felt the same way when I was the new girl in the office.
How did you get over it?
I learned how to say no in a way that lets people know I'm not being uncooperative. I'm just doing what's best for me and for the company.
It sounds like I could learn a thing or two from you. Question.
Which of the following pictures best describes the way the man feels today?
Two.
Question.
Which of the following pictures best describes what Dave did?
Three.
Although slavery ended over 150 years ago, black men still face oppression today. Sadly, the police are often the ones responsible for it.
That is especially disturbing, considering the role of the police is supposed to be to serve and protect the public.
The color of one's skin makes a huge difference. Look at George Floyd, the man who died after a police officer held him down for 9 minutes with his knee on his neck.
Even when he kept repeating, "I can't breathe," the officer didn't let up the pressure. The other cops who were on the scene just stood around watching him die.
It was shameful. Fortunately, someone filmed the arrest, so the police officers had to answer for killing Floyd.
And when people saw how viciously the one police officer had behaved toward a man who obviously needed medical help, there were huge protests all over America.
Those protests were an angry call to action. I think police training should be improved so officers will handle their interactions with black members of the public better.
It has to happen. It seems like the default approach of most police when dealing with black men is to use force first and ask questions later. Question.
Which photo shows what might happen if the police followed the woman's suggestion about officer training?
Four.
We see the same thing again and again. It is only through popular protest that the American civil rights movement can make any progress.
I agree. Giving black women the right to vote in elections? Protests finally made that happen in 1965.
What about ending racial segregation in schools? Protests led to a court case that forced the government to take action in 1954.
Remember the fight for blacks to be allowed to sit anywhere they wanted on buses? Once again, a protest set things in motion.
Rosa Parks was one brave woman. Some white people who lived in Alabama at that time could be vicious when they thought blacks did not know their place.
Things are different today. Civil rights protests tend to focus on ending police violence against black citizens.
It's not just black people who are calling for action either. People of all races, creeds, and colors are demanding social transformation.
Look at the numbers. Black men in America are arrested and put in jail at a much higher rate than white, Asian, or Hispanic men are. Where is the justice in that?
It's likely not because blacks are more likely to be criminals, but because the police are more likely to focus on them because of prejudice.
Question.
Which photo shows something that only became possible because of civil rights protests?
2. 图片听解第二部分多选题，说明请仔细观察图片，并聆听试题，从听到的4个选项中选出最符合图意的2个答案。
1.
Which two of the following statements are correct? A. In 2018, there were more non-black students than black students at HBCUs. B. In 2018, there were more black students than non-black students at HBCUs. C. 2010 was the year with more private non-profit HBCUs than public HBCUs. D. 2010 was the year with the highest total student enrollment at HBCUs.
Two.
Which two of the following statements are true about the picture? A. It shows a protester demanding cleaner air. B. It shows a protester demanding justice after a black man was killed by the police. C. It shows a protester demanding an end to police oppression of blacks. D. It shows a protester demanding better COVID-19 medical care.
Three.
Which two of the following are true about the poster? A. It shows what can happen when people get overwhelmed. B. It illustrates how to provide guidance to classmates or coworkers. C. It shows how to avoid becoming overwhelmed. D. It is an example of what can happen with too many obligations.
Four.
Which two of the following best describes the work environment? A. This is a fairly casual office environment. B. The colleagues seem to get along well. C. There is a strict sense of obedience here. D. One of the workers is being confronted.
3. 对答说明请听语音内容，从4个选项中选出一个最适当的回应。
1.
As you're a senior student here, I could really use some guidance from you.
Two.
If not for slaves, early European settlers in the New World would never have enjoyed such prosperity.
Three.
Do you know the I have a dream speech used repetition to deliver a call to action?
Four.
The Emancipation Proclamation was among the most important legal changes in America's history.
Five.
All these exams are really fueling my anxiety.
6.
It was black slaves who brought African musical influences to America.
Seven.
I need to assert myself in class more.
Eight.
What is your perspective on Brian asking to copy my homework?
4. 简短对话单题说明，请听语音内容和相关的问题，从4个选项中选出一个最适当的选项。
1.
Can you explain how Protestants and Catholics are different? They are all Christians, right?
Yes, they are. Catholics recognize the authority of the Pope, who leads the Church from Rome, whereas Protestants do not.
Is that the only difference between them?
There are many more Catholics than Protestants. Most Protestants live in North America and Europe, while Catholics can be found all over the world. Question.
What can we infer from the passage?
Two.
I consulted a few chapters of a self-help book, and I found out why I've been having some troubles at school recently.
What did you find?
Well, I think I suffer from a mild depression, and likewise, this causes me to be withdrawn and quiet. That's why I have trouble relating to people.
Well, the good thing is you can always get help, and you can always talk to me if you're having problems. I'm here for you.
Question.
Why does the man have trouble relating to people?
Three.
If you don't help me, we're no longer friends.
You know that's emotional blackmail, right?
What do you mean?
I'm not under any obligation to help you if I don't agree with what you're doing, just because we're friends. And our friendship shouldn't depend on me just doing whatever you tell me to.
Question.
According to the conversation, what is emotional blackmail?
Four.
Have you ever listened to Negro spirituals? Some old recordings really appeal to me for reasons I can't explain.
You're more likely to find me listening to a symphony. Aren't spirituals just church songs about giving glory to the Lord?
They are religious songs that have roots in the chants and shouts of black slaves.
I remember reading that slaves used to sing in a call and response pattern to take their minds off their oppression while they worked in the fields.
Question.
What does the passage mainly discuss?
5. 简短对话题组说明，请听语音内容和相关的问题，从4个选项中选出一个最适当的选项。
1,
Hey, it's February 1st. What should we do to observe Black History Month?
I know the International Students Club is organizing some activities. A lot of club members are from African and Caribbean countries, so they always schedule events to mark it.
Okay, let me check my phone. Ah, here it is.
So what's going on?
Tonight in the Students' Activity Center, there's going to be a reading of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, followed by a discussion of its importance today.
That sounds interesting. I'd definitely be into checking that out.
Me too. Let's go. Then tomorrow afternoon, the book club is hosting a series of talks on police oppression of blacks in the library. Should we go?
To be honest, I think that topic is much more relevant for America than it is for a society like Taiwan, where police don't really discriminate against black people.
You're right, I guess. The police in America can be vicious when they deal with young black men in particular, but it's not really a problem here.
I suppose we could always go online later to get a condensed version of the speaker's main points from the book club's FB page. Question: What is true about the two speakers?
Question: What can we reasonably infer about the man and the woman from the passage?
Two.
Have you studied for the history quiz yet?
Nah, I'll probably just copy the answers off somebody.
What? There's a heavy penalty for cheating, you know.
What's the worst that could happen? I'll get a 0 on the quiz. It's not as though the quiz is a big part of our assessment. It's not a big deal.
No, if the school discovers your scheme, you could get expelled.
Oh, I didn't realize it was so serious.
You really shouldn't be so casual about your studies, you know. This is important.
You're right. Well, I guess I still have a bit of time to study up.
Yep, the quiz isn't until tomorrow. I'll be happy to help you if you need.
Question: What could happen if someone gets caught cheating on a test?
Question: What is true of the quiz according to the man?
6. 短文听解题组说明，每2题为1题组，请先阅读试题本的题目及选项，然后听语音播出的内容，从4个选项中选出一个最适当的选项。
1,
请先阅读试题。
You might think that to get ahead in the working world, you have to say yes a lot. However, saying no can be just as important. For example, let's say someone asks you to do a task that isn't in your job description. What this does is that it actually stops you from doing what you're supposed to be doing. So say no in a way that explains this clearly and calmly. Secondly, if you don't agree with being asked to do a certain project, you should absolutely say so. Again, explain yourself clearly and calmly. Tell why you're not a good fit and why saying no is better for the company in this case. Also, say no to any project that doesn't help the company achieve key goals. It's just a waste of time if it's not getting the company where it wants to go.
Two.
请先阅读试题。
It was not until 1964 that the Civil Rights Act officially ended segregation in America. Before President Lyndon Johnson signed that bill to make it a law, colored people, as blacks were then known, were treated very differently from whites. Insofar as daily life went, blacks were forbidden to enter restaurants or use drinking fountains that were reserved for whites. There were waiting areas on train platforms and at bus stops, as well as seats on buses and trains that were specifically for blacks to use. White people, of course, were not subject to any restrictions like these. They could go wherever they wanted, whenever they wanted. Segregation meant black and white children had to attend different schools and students could not mix. Whites benefited from this discrimination, which kept blacks at a constant disadvantage.
Three.
请先阅读试题。
Emotional blackmail in the office can be a very serious problem. What does it look like in the workplace setting? Let's take a look at an example. Let's say, for example, that you are about to head home at 5 p.m. You're looking forward to getting back to your family after a long, hard day. Best of all, tomorrow is Saturday, a day off. But then your boss comes to you. He says he needs you to come in tomorrow. He hates to ask, but he's under a lot of pressure from corporate headquarters to increase efficiency. It's giving him a lot of stress and headaches. It's negatively affecting his home life. You feel so sorry for him that you agree to come in, taking time away from your own family. It's important to know that this sort of manipulation is not okay, and it's always permitted for you to say no.
4.
请先阅读试题。
An oasis is a place that has a permanent water source in the midst of a searing dry desert. Of course, the presence of water means it is also a place where trees and other plants can grow, their leaves dripping with moisture. Animals and humans alike know that the shadow of these same trees provides them with a chance to escape the withering rays of the sun, at least for a while. Moreover, access to drinking water means the difference between life and death in the sweltering desert heat. The image of an oasis has always been symbolic of a place where one feels comfortable and where all one's needs are met. For example, we might say that a public library is an oasis of peace and quiet in a noisy, crowded city.
7. 长篇听解说明每4题为1题组，请先阅读试题本的大纲或图表及选项，然后听语音播出的内容，可同步利用试题本上的大纲或图表，记录重要讯息与细节。此部分不计分。再根据语音播出的题目，从4个选项中选出一个最适当的选项。
1.
请先阅读试题。
The Euro-American slave trade will surely go down in history as one of the darkest chapters.
I would have to agree with you. It is shameful how white Europeans kidnapped blacks from their home countries in Africa and forced them into captivity.
Starting in the 1600s, thousands of those Africans were taken aboard wooden ships that sailed across the Atlantic Ocean.
The slave traders were vicious.
Conditions on the slave ships were awful. Slaves lay in chains side by side on the hard floor. They languished in the heat below the ship's decks, dripping with sweat.
Plus, the men, women, and children were kept segregated. The families who were split up must have felt so much despair at their miserable fate.
Hundreds of slaves were crammed into small spaces, all wearing heavy manacles on their wrists and ankles. A slave ship can accommodate over 400 slaves, but not all of them survived the ocean crossing alive.
The bodies of the ones who died in the journey were just dumped into the ocean.
Meanwhile, the ones who made it alive to the New World had to work without any pay.
Insofar as rights were concerned, slaves were not even regarded as human by their masters. They were bought and sold like property.
And masters could beat their slaves as punishment for any mistakes they made.
Slaves had no choice but to live out the rest of their lives in exile, knowing they could never return home to Africa.
It was the work of those slaves and their offspring that transformed the New World into a place of great material prosperity.
It was only their white masters who profited, though.
Sadly, that is true. Slavery may have ended in America in 1863, but its long-term effects endure today.
Things are certainly better than they were in the days of slavery, but the oppression that kept black people down has not disappeared altogether.
Yes, black people in America today are still struggling against discrimination.
America still has a long way to go toward ensuring the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for blacks. Question: how were the slaves segregated on slave ships? Question: how were the slaves arranged on slave ships?
Question: how many slaves could be transported on a slave ship? Question: which of the following statements is not true about slavery?
Two.
请先阅读试题。
You know what I found out recently? I'm a real people pleaser, so I often have trouble saying no.
I used to be the same way, but then I learned that saying no can be one of the best things you can ever do.
Really? Why?
For starters, you should look at you saying yes as something like a product. If you say yes all the time, your product won't be worth very much, will it?
Oh, I see. If it's rare, it would be worth more.
That's right. It's that old principle of supply and demand. Secondly, saying no is one of the best ways to safeguard your mental health. If you say yes too often, you wind up overextended, too busy, and exhausted.
I can definitely relate to that. I'm tired all the time these days, and I keep taking on more and more projects at work and in my personal life.
You also have to learn to say no to yourself sometimes, too.
What? I don't get it.
Let's say you're on a diet, but you really want that delicious pizza you saw in the online ad you scrolled by. If you eat it, you might feel good in the short term, but in the long term, this will only hurt your goal of losing weight.
Okay, so I have to learn to say no to things I might want, but which will stop me from doing what I set out to achieve.
You got it. Saying no to yourself at the right time is just as important as saying no to others. It's all about figuring out what is most important to you.
And figuring out how to stop anything from getting between you and those important goals.
Exactly. I'm not perfect, but I found that keeping this in mind has really helped me get a greater focus and do more of what I really want to do.
Thanks, that's great advice. Question. What is true of the woman's state of mind right now? Question. If you say no more often, what would happen?
Question. According to the man, when should you say no to yourself? Question. What kind of person is the woman according to the conversation?
This is the end of the listening comprehension test.
听力测验结束。